Good afternoon, colleagues, and we are here pursuant to Standing Orders 81.5, Supplementary Estimates B 2014-15. The Vote 1B under Communication Security Establishment, Vote 1B under Military Police Complaints Commission, Votes 1B and 10B under National Defense referred to this committee on Wednesday, November 5th, 2014. With us today, the Minister of National Defence, the Honourable Rob Nicholson, PC, MP. Minister, thank you very much for being with us today. And with him, appearing as witnesses from the Department of National Defence, Richard Fadden, the Deputy Minister, Lieutenant General Guy Thibault, Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, Rear Admiral Patrick Finn, Chief of Staff, Materiel Group, Kevin Lindsay, the Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer, and Jaime Pitfield, Assistant Deputy Minister, Infrastructure and Environment. And from the Communication Security Establishment, John Forster, Deputy Head and Chief. Mr. Nicholson, your opening remarks, please, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's an honor for me to be here today to discuss the Supplementary Estimates B for the year 2014-15. C'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous pour...
I'm pleased to be here with you today to discuss the Supplementary Estimates B.
Richard Fadden, Deputy Minister of National Defence, John Forster, Chief of the Communication Security Establishment, Lieutenant General Guy Thibault, Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, Mr. Kevin Lindsay, Assistant Deputy Minister, Finance and Corporate Services, Rear Admiral Patrick Finn, Chief of Staff, Materiel Group. And let me first start by saying that I remain greatly impressed by the work of the Canadian Armed Forces and the employees of the Department of National Defence every single day. The entire defence team does incredible work on behalf of Canada. The unique challenges of such a large department are obvious, and the breadth of our responsibilities and the efforts they require can be extremely complex. So let me turn to the specifics of Supplementary Estimates B before us today. I assure you, Mr. Chair, that the National Defence continues to exercise strong fiscal management and careful stewardship of its resources. As such, we are maximizing the use of every dollar and making concerted efforts to support the government's goal of returning to a balanced budget in 2015. In supplementary estimates, we're requesting just over $913 million in new appropriations. At the heart of these estimates is the government's continuing commitment to ensure that the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces have the right equipment to do the difficult tasks that they are asked to perform. Of this amount, $652 million will go to the sustainment and operational readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces in support of the ongoing implementation of our foundation defence policy, the Canadian First Defence Strategy. This amount includes the following: sustaining the operational requirements of the Chinook helicopter, modernizing our fleet of Halifax-class frigates and Victoria-class submarines, Aurora maritime patrol aircraft, light armoured vehicles, as well as infrastructure, maintenance and repair, training and personnel support. In addition, National Defence is playing its rightful part as custodians of the environment. We are requesting funding of $55 million related to the assessment, management and remediation of federal contaminated sites to be carried out under the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. We're also requesting $15 million in funding for the reinvestment of revenues from the sale or transfer of real property. This relates to the reinvestment of revenues from the sale of the Downsview Park and Stanley Green properties in Toronto. Mr. Chair, another important item regards a new program for which we are asking of funding of approximately $700,000, and this is the Compensation for Employers of Reservists program.
Reservists are playing a larger role in meeting the operational needs and challenges of the Canadian Armed Forces
and the business community when their reservist employees are released for military duty. Employers, of course, wish to support their employees as they serve Canada, but it's become clear that some form of compensation is necessary. In Budget 2012, the government announced that it would create a new program to help offset employers' costs and the compensation of employers of reservist program delivers on that commitment. Mr. Chair, of the funds requested, we are offsetting $37 million in net transfers with other government departments. The bulk of this $28.6 million is for assessment, management, and remediation of federal contaminated sites. Other transfers to national defense involve funds for research as well as science and technology support and logistical services. This reduces our total request for new funding to $876 million. If approved, these funds would raise the authorities to date of the department to roughly $19.8 billion, up from approximately $18.9 billion. Mr. Chair, as I described, the majority of this new funding will go towards sustainment and operational readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces in support of the implementation of the Canada First Defence Strategy and would allow us to support new operations. Indeed, the turmoil we see in both Ukraine and Iraq amply demonstrates the strong need for the Canadian Armed Forces to be ready to answer the call of duty and to contribute to international peace and stability. These two international conflicts have prompted two major Canadian Armed Forces operations. Operation Reassurance supports NATO assurance measures in Europe through the provision of military capabilities for training, exercises, demonstrations, and assigned NATO tasks in response to the Putin regime's military aggression in the region. Canadian Armed Forces are contributing to operational planning at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. Our soldiers have routinely taken part in NATO training exercises to strengthen our interoperability with our NATO allies. As you know, HMCS Toronto is currently operating under Standing NATO Maritime Group 2 in the Mediterranean Sea. And the Air Task Force is deployed to Lithuania, helping safeguard NATO European airspace under the Baltic Air Policing Mission. These activities are in addition to providing financial, humanitarian, and non-lethal military support. Mr. Chair, this year we have also witnessed the emergence of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL, a clear threat to local, regional, and international security. This terrorist group represents a direct threat. They have issued calls for targeted attacks against several countries, including Canada. Several months ago, we made the decision we could not simply stand by. And the government announced our participation in Operation Impact, the Canadian Armed Forces support to the international coalition assisting security forces in the Republic of Iraq fighting against ISIL. Canada has contributed 6 CF-18 Hornets, 2 CP-140 Auroras, and 1 Polaris aerial refueler to aid in airstrikes aimed at destroying ISIL's infrastructure and equipment, denying the terrorists the military means to attack Iraqi security forces or coalition assets. Canada has already conducted several successful missions which have significantly reduced ISIL's military capabilities. Additionally, almost 600 Canadian Armed Forces personnel are deployed on Op Impact, contributing to the airstrikes, as well as through support elements such as command and control, medical personnel, and logistics. Canada has provided more than $28 million to respond to the humanitarian needs in Iraq. And we will continue to monitor and assess this situation and provide further assistance alongside our allies as needed. Mr. Chair, there will be incremental costs to this mission, as there are for any mission. And we will report the exact costs for Operation Impact through existing parliamentary mechanisms once they are finalized. But as reports from Human Rights Watch and others show, there is a human cost to doing nothing. This terrorist group is committing mass atrocities, including the abduction, torture, and enslaving of innocent women and children. I know our men and women in uniform will continue to demonstrate operational excellence as Canada stands with our coalition partners against the violence of ISIL. I can assure you that as we move forward in this fiscal year, the Department will monitor our fiscal requirements, continue to ensure value for taxpayers' dollars, and continue to serve the people of Canada to the highest possible standard while keeping our country safe. Je suis certain que le comité aura des questions.
I'm sure that the committee will have questions on the specifics of this supplementary estimates package, and I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Minister, and we'll proceed now to our first round of questions with 7-minute slots. Mr. Norlock, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to the witnesses, especially the Minister. Thank you for attending today. And I guess my first question is going to be very broad-based, Minister. In the estimates, there are numerous initiatives being funded that fall under the Canada First Defence Strategy. Can you outline how these funding initiatives help contribute to the goals of the Canada First Defence Strategy and how they contribute to the readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces?
Well, you hit it right on the head, Mr. Norlock, in the sense that this contributes to our capabilities, and it gives us the opportunity to intervene and support those activities that we support. And so when you have flooding in Alberta as well as international operations, it's very important that we have the capability. So we have to ensure that we have the personnel in place, we have the capability. That includes, of course, the proper equipment to be able to do this. We understand and recognize that the sovereignty of Canada and the protection of Canada is our #1 responsibility. We have a responsibility as well to North American safety and security, and we work with the United States and Mexico and other allies to ensure that. And part of this as well is our capability to involve ourselves when necessary in international operations. And in my opening remarks, I referred to 2 of them that we are involved with at the present time. But thank you for the question. The Canada First Defence Strategy is the core of what we are all about and what we are doing and what we hope to continue to do.
Thank you very much, Minister. And in 2013-2014, the government acquired 15 new Chinook helicopters. These estimates will see funding for operational sustainment of the Chinooks. And what value do they provide to the Canadian Forces? And how do they contribute to the Canada First Defence Strategy?
Well, being able to respond to disasters at home is a key part of the Canada First Defence Strategy, and the tactical medium to heavy lift helicopter, the Chinook's main role will be to rapidly move ground forces and equipment to areas that may be difficult or dangerous to access. The older version of the Chinooks, you may be aware, had proven its capabilities in Afghanistan, among other places, and the newer ones will only be better in the sense that there will be upgraded technology. And so you did point out that there is $115 million, and this will be funding for the operational sustainment of the Chinooks. In previous budgets and estimates, the cost of doing those those constructions were a part of that, but this will be the sustainment cost. But it's absolutely vital, and it goes back to what I was saying about capability. We have to have complete capability, or to the extent possible, for our country, and I think this is an important part of that. I think they're a tremendous asset for the armed forces.
Minister, I'd like to move over to the Navy and the Halifax-class frigates, which are the backbone of our Navy. And they've been critical to the defense of our coastal waters and continue to contribute to missions that are abroad. The modernization will further enhance these capabilities. And can you outline for us what we're doing to modernize these frigates?
We are doing quite a bit, Mr. Norlock, and I was very pleased to be in Halifax yesterday to initiate the HMCS Fredericton and to get the word that these were now, the ship was now completely operational and had passed all the necessary steps. This is part of an ongoing effort that we have made to update these ships. They were commissioned for the most part in the 1980s. I remember with pride being in Toronto for the christening of the HMCS Toronto back in 1993. And I remember at the time how impressed I was, how operational capable and how modern these were. But as you know, a lot has changed in technology in the last 25 years. And so I was very pleased yesterday to have a very relatively quick tour of the HMCS Montreal to see all the different technological improvements that they have made, and it was very, very impressive. And one of the things that you get when you talk with the members of our Navy and indeed other parts of the armed forces, how proud they are and how pleased they are to get this kind of update. And they told me that they believed that this was state-of-the-art, not just with respect to Canada, but in the world. And they have countries like New Zealand that are entering into contracts for the upgrade, for upgrades similar to the ones that we have already undertaken. And it really gives you a great feeling about the Navy and what we are capable of. But again, when you see those men and women who are on the front line and how pleased they are at this, it reinforces, I believe, the feeling in all of us that these were very worthwhile investments by Canada.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I can attest that if you want to maintain esprit de corps, you have to provide the necessary equipment to do so, and I think we're well on the way. I wonder if we can move now, since we've dealt with Chinooks and we went to boats, if we go back to some aircraft. And of course, the proven capabilities of the Aurora have served the Royal Canadian Air Force very well in recent years. While they're getting up in age, they continue to be world-class, notably contributing to the battle against ISIL in Iraq.
Brief question, please, Mr. Norrock.
Yes, and their ability to provide reconnaissance and surveillance. And I wonder, can you tell us what the funding estimates in the Aurora, with regard to the Auroras, what they will contribute to?
They are part of this effort that we have undertaken to get the Auroras, in a sense, like new, to have them as up-to-date as possible. And you quite correctly pointed out that they play a vital role in reconnaissance and surveillance with respect to Operation Impact. And this will contribute to the modernization program that was announced in 2014. We announced the restoration of 4 additional Aurora aircraft so that we completely update their configuration. And it goes to making sure that we have the capability, not just, I'll wrap up, not just within the Navy, of course, Mr. Chairman, but with the Air Force as well.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Chisholm, please. Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for being here today, and the senior staff that are here with you. We're here to talk about the sub-Bs, and I must tell you that I was interested in hearing whether or not you were going to be increasing the sub-Bs or otherwise what you were estimating in terms of the cost for our participation in Operation Impact. You've outlined what we're looking at: 6 CF-18 Hornets, 2 CP-140 Auroras, 1 CC-150T Polaris aerial refueler, 600 Canadian Armed Forces, and on and on. We've been asking now for a couple of months for the costs. We know that we understand, according to General Tom Lawson, Chief of Staff, that an estimate has been provided to Cabinet. The Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Bazin, on November 24th, told us that government plans to release a copy of the cost estimate today.
Point of order.
Mr. Chairman.
That was a mischaracterization of my words. If you actually review the transcript from CBC, my comments were that there would probably be questions to the minister on the cost of operation impact, not that we'd release anything. That was a characterization by Evan Solomon that was wrong.
Well, to your question, Mr. Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I'd like to ask the minister if he plans to give us an indication of how the sub-Bs are, whether they're going to be increased. Is he going to tell us at all about the additional costs that are going to be incurred as a result of participation in this operation? What can we expect to hear from him and his department?
The sub-Bs don't include the costs of the incremental costs of operation impact, and they will be reported in the normal way. Usually within 90 days of the completion of a mission, the costs are tabled. We've initiated this 6-month mission around the first week of October, so we've been in it about 6-7 weeks now, and I've been very pleased with the results. But this is a 6-month mission, and when the costs are known, we will table them in the usual way. But there was no plans to start amending the cost estimates. I don't think that would actually be the place for it.
So, can you tell us whether you have a cost estimate of the operation that you can give us some idea of the confidence level that you have in relation to that? I mean, the American president, when he announced their participation in this operation, was able to tell the American public an estimate of about $7.5 million a day. That was back on August the 29th. I don't understand why members of this committee, or Canadians for that matter, it's a big deal. You've said it yourself. I certainly agree with you, and we'd like to know, frankly, what we're looking at. What are you setting aside in terms of the costs, or are we just going to go ahead and participate and pay as she goes?
Again, there are incremental costs. There are many fixed costs, of course, with respect to the equipment that we have and the personnel that we are deploying, and we will make those costs known when they're known. And so it's a little difficult to project in 5 months what we will do, and many times it's in terms of how many missions they fly. It's an ongoing effort, but what I point out to Mr. Chisholm is that there is a huge human cost if we don't participate. The daily atrocities that we're made aware of by ISIL, the atrocities against men, women, and children are I hesitate to use the word unprecedented, but as bad as anything that we have seen. And so, yes, there will be costs to the Canadian military. They're not part of Sub-B, but they will be part of future costs. And Canadians, I believe, will be supportive of the costs of this mission, because Canadians support this mission and understand what it's all about. And they understand the human cost, too, if we did not get involved.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think there's any question that Canadians are concerns about the costs, all the costs, the human costs, and the cost to the Treasury, and the cost to the taxpayer. And certainly the people in Dartmouth Cole Harbour are asking me, why is the government not coming clean with what this is going to cost us? You've talked about, and I don't dispute that, about the human costs, but surely we lay out budgets for everything in this government. Are you not confident, Mr. Minister, with the estimates that have been provided to you? Because we know they've been provided to you. Your Chief of Staff has said so. Are you not confident with the estimates that have been provided by
I'm confident in everything that's provided to me by the department and the members of our armed forces. But I would say to your constituent here who is concerned about the costs of this, I would point out to him or her the human costs of not doing anything in this area, and I would indicate to him that to be exact at the beginning of a mission as to exactly what a mission will cost is always challenging, and we have to be able to adapt, and we'll go forward, and you can tell them that we will report it in the usual way.
Mr. Minister, does do your officials not know what it's going to cost for a sortie? What it's going to cost to fly one of the Hornets and to drop? You've told us in the House before about 500-ton bombs, and do your officials not know what those costs?
Well, there are individual costs. You were talking about the costs of this mission, and
yes.
Again, I've indicated that when the mission is completed, we will make those costs known at the completion of the mission. So
I got to tell you, for people in Dartmouth Cole Harbour, I don't think that's good enough, Minister.
I appreciate that, and I know for you, Mr. Chisholm, it must be difficult because any money we spent in this area does not have your support.
No, so I want to know. I'm conscious, Mr. Minister, that, as a member of Parliament, I'm conscious.
Like the mission and you don't support it, but
I'm conscious.
I'm
conscious with the money that we spend and that you spend, and that's what I want to hold you. Try to hold you accountable.
Order, please, and time. Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. Mr. Chizu, 7 minutes.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much, Minister, for your testimony, and thank you again for your leadership at the Ministry and the very contained supplementary B estimates. You know, it is quite impressive to have so good in this year the supplementary estimates. I will go to a question I have seen regarding the reservists. As we know, the reservists are an integral part of the Canadian Armed Forces. I served in the reserve, in the Reg Force, and I know how important they are, the reservists, for us. And they are important for their units and their local communities. Being able to balance the work life and that of the military can be very difficult. There is funding in these estimates for the compensation for employers of reservist program. How will this assist reservists in the difficult task they have of balancing their work and military life?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chizu, for that question. No reservist should have to choose between serving their country and keeping their full-time job. That's the bottom line. As you know, the reservists are a huge part of the support for Canada's military efforts. And we've known for decades that they are an integral, essential part of our ability to maintain the capability of our armed forces, and our reserves certainly have my support, and I know your support as well. We want to make it possible to assist businesses and institutions that have reservists deployed on a full-time operational duty, both either domestically and abroad, that we want to be able to assist them. And so the package that I've announced will go to those employers to help offset the costs of one or more of these reservists who are employed by them, so that because we know business employers are, for the most part, very supportive of the reservists within their employment, and they too, of course, support this country and what this country stands for, and the operations that we have undertaken as a nation. And so this is the government's way of assisting, easing that burden a bit, and it helps everybody. The reservists, I'm sure, appreciate the support. The businesses themselves appreciate it, and indeed all of Canadians support what our reservists contribute. And I know Colonel Opitz over there and his association with reserve unit down there, my neck of the woods, he would be an expert to be able to tell you just how important it is to have reservists and to support them in their efforts. And I don't have to tell you how valuable they were in the operation in Afghanistan. I've met many reservists who tell me that they were deployed and how proud they were to serve their country. And so it's part of that greater story of the support of our military. And I was very pleased to be able to make that announcement.
As we know very well, the training is very important for high readiness units, and I know that in the period of darkness we didn't have had, and I served in that period, we didn't have had too much attention given to training and financial support. So lately, the Canadian Armed Forces have demonstrated a high level of readiness in recent months, being able to deploy rapidly in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, where our allies were in need. Is there any funding in these estimates to ensure that when crisis strikes in the future, our armed forces will be ready to respond rapidly?
Thank you for that question. As a matter of fact, Mr. Chizo, there's $59 million that is allocated in sub-Bs for enhanced training for high readiness units. This ensures that the Canadian Armed Forces has the training it needs to be ready to meet the security challenges both here at home and abroad. If the last year has taught us anything, it is that we have to maintain that capability. We have to be able to respond. I don't think any of us at this table would have been able to guess 1 year ago what we would be facing in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, what we would be facing with ISIL. And it underscores the necessity for us to continue to invest in high capability, high readiness. And so I think it's entirely appropriate that we include in sub-Bs that you have before you that $59 million that we will turn over to the armed forces to ensure that they can help maintain that high level of readiness. We have to do this, and what the past has taught us is that we have to continue to maintain that capability, and the last year is the perfect example of what that's all about.
Thank you very much, Minister. And finally, a question about the caring of ill and injured. As I was deployed in Afghanistan, I know the caring of our ill and injured is a top priority for Canadians. Furthermore, caring for our ill and injured contributes to the readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces. Can you outline for the committee if any funding in these estimates will be allocated for caring for our ill and injured soldiers?
Yes, Mr. Chizu, there is $22 million for the Joint Personnel Support Units, and this builds on what we are doing. And you may be aware of an announcement that I made with the Minister of Veterans Affairs a couple of days ago in Halifax, whereby we are contributing additional funds and support to support our men and women in uniform who are facing the challenges that you referred to, and following that through to when they become veterans, and to make that transition more smooth. And so I'm very pleased that we have made this a priority. We have continued to hire healthcare professionals. We've almost doubled them since taking office. We have increased substantially the funds in that area to work with and support them, more mental health professionals, greater support, peer group support, and this is just one more component of that we continue to build on and continue to fund. This is
Thank
money
you, Minister. Time?
well invested.
Thank you. Ms. Murray, please. 7 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, thank you, Minister, and the team with you for being here to help us understand the deployment of taxpayer dollars through your ministry. I was surprised that you refused to provide cost estimate information to Mr. Chisholm, because really the usual way and the normal way, as evidenced by the United States and Australia, is to provide cost estimates to the to Parliament and the public. And I do want to remind the Minister that the primary responsibility of members of Parliament is to hold government to account for the expenditures of taxpayer funds. So I find this a surprising stand on the part of this government, and does the minister have concerns that should these estimates be provided, that it would be uncomfortable for the government, or that you would not have a confidence that you could have an outcome that is similar to the estimated costs? Or can you give us some rationale for this unusual approach?
Again, there are always difficulties trying to estimate in advance when you go into a deployment areas to what this is going to cost. Again, I pointed out that many of the costs are fixed costs in the sense that we own the equipment, we pay the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, and I have been very upfront that there, of course, will be incremental costs, but our testimony here is not about the deployment of taxpayers' money. It's about the deployment of Canadian men and women in uniform and making sure that they have the capability and support that they need and deserve. And this mission is about the human cost of doing nothing, of standing on the sidelines, which has not been a Canadian tradition or indeed a Canadian value.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Those we already heard some of those explanations.
I was
they're
hoping
very
for
something.
Though, they're very important to talk about.
So could the minister tell me why, in a question on the order paper, my inquiry to the ministry about the Operation Reassurance, which is not the one that the minister has already been discussing, the answer was that I received to this formal application for cost estimates was this. I'll read it. Cost estimates are dynamic and evolve with the refining of planning and operational assumptions. These estimates are updated regularly to support planning efforts and decision making and would therefore be inaccurate. I mean, that's the answer I received in asking for the cost estimate. And it's insulting to the institution of Parliament and insulting to Canadians to define what a cost estimate is as something that is dynamic. Yes, we know that. And so I would like to ask why with Operation Reassurance, you have not authorized information to the public, and secondly, are there incremental costs for Operation Reassurance in this budget supplementary B request, and if so, what are they?
Well, again, there are supplemental costs, and to any time we initiate a mission, and we have indicated with respect to Operation Reassurance that we are going to be there and that we are going to continue our operations. Now, for instance, we are part of the Baltic air policing mission that is ongoing, and we are in discussions with our NATO allies as to
Excuse me, Minister, my question was, are those additional costs in the supplementary request?
Supplemental B estimates are the estimates you have right before you. There are no other estimates, and any other estimates for any other costs, we will either have them as part of Operation Supplemental C when that comes, or be part of the main budget. But what you have before you, there are no additional ones than Sub B, and I'm sure you've got a list of them. And again,
thank you. I have another set of questions. Right. There's $912 million that are being requested in the supplementary B estimates for operational expenditures. Of that $912,672,021, how much of that is for support for soldiers and for armed force members with injuries, so mental health support, and how much is for support for their families?
Pardon me? I'm going to ask Kevin Lindsay here to provide some of the details of that. As you may have heard in a previous answer that I gave with respect to the Joint Personnel Support Union, the money that we are putting into that builds on what has already been budgeted.
Just wondering what percentage.
Just let me finish just for a second. These are supplementary estimates, but I'd ask Kevin Lindsay to provide some additional details.
So how much of this is for mental health and for support for families of armed forces members?
Those estimates are included in the main estimate that you had before you.
Excuse me, this is my opportunity to ask questions. This is a supplementary an additional amount that's being requested by the minister. How much of that is for mental health support, and how much of that is for families of armed force members?
Kevin?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In these supplementary estimates, in addition to the base budget, which we get through main estimates, there is an additional $22 million in these estimates to go to the Joint Personnel Support Units to carry out a variety of support functions to personnel. Unfortunately, I don't have a breakdown of that going to mental health versus other issues with me today.
Okay, so for people and their problems, it's what, a couple of percentage of the total amount being requested.
It's $22 million in addition to the main estimates.
So it's about 2%. Thank you. So I also have some questions about...
Very brief questions, Ms. Murray, please.
Okay, I'm going to ask about the fines public interest hearing, the request for $2.4 million. So this is a family not allowed to see an interim report of a death to their family member 6 years ago. So what would this additional funding be for? Why is the government requesting more money? And why should the family have to wait more than 6 years and not have closure?
Very brief answer, please, Minister.
If you're asking me about the joint personnel support, you know, why are we doing that? Because of the record of success.
No, the minister misunderstood my question.
Okay.
I'm afraid we've hit time.
It was about the
I'm
fines.
afraid, Ms. Murray. Time.
The fine?
The fines,
we now go to
public
our
interest hearing.
Ms. Murray, time.
$2.4 million.
Ms. Murray, please, time. We'll now go to the second round of questions, 5-minute slots, beginning with Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Minister, and it's good to see you and your officials here today. I see that D&D is requesting $652 million for the, quote, sustainment and operational readiness of the Canadian Armed Forces in support of the ongoing implementation of the Canadian First Defence Strategy, end quote. The supplementary estimates B note that D&D will use these funds merely to, quote, support operational readiness for marine, land, and aerospace efforts, which includes incremental operational and sustainment requirements of Chinooks, 147s, fleet maintenance of the submarines, frigates, aircraft, and light armored vehicles, infrastructure maintenance and repair, as well as training and personal support, end quote. Could you explain why base funds provided through the main estimates are not sufficient to cover CAF readiness, particularly training, as well as equipment, infrastructure, maintenance, and repair, and why more funds are required for this purpose today?
Well, we wanted to make sure that we get it right, Mr. Williamson, and what you saw in the main estimates are what our expectations are of the procurement costs, the costs of maintaining the services that we have, and what you have here is, I believe, an accurate indication as to what it is we are going to have to pay out to make sure that we maintain that capability and readiness that is absolutely essential for the Canadian Armed Forces. And this is done through supplementary estimates, and occasionally, I believe, sometimes there's supplementary C estimates as well, because we want to make sure we get it right. And again, it underscores this government's commitment to investing in our armed forces and to making sure that they have the equipment they need to get the job done on behalf of this country. We expect a lot of the members of our armed forces, and they have always delivered on behalf of this country, and they have delivered on behalf of people abroad, but there has to be resources put into that for them to do that, and as those costs become fixed, we put them into the estimates, and or again, depending on when they arise, into the main estimates. But I think it's important that we do this, and I'm hoping that this will have the support of all members here at this committee.
Very good. Thank you. We talked earlier about the Halifax-class frigates and the modernization they're going through, and you answered Mr. Chizu's question around that. This is a local issue. I think it's important to myself and Mr. Chisholm. Can I ask, it's not really so much part of the supplementary estimates, but I'd be curious to kind of just get a broad overview of the naval shipbuilding procurement, or not, sorry, the naval shipbuilding operations in Halifax, how they're going. Are we getting that right, and is that on track to proceed?
I think we're getting it right. And needless to say, watch this very carefully. And that's one of the projects that I have been very, very impressed with. To see the updated technology that is now a part of these modernized frigates is extremely impressive. I saw them, and I was in a number of them before this was done, and I had explained to me the technology that they have, and I can't tell you how impressed I am to see what the new configuration looks like today and what they are capable of. And this gives Canada a world-class capability, and the Americans and others are watching very carefully what it is that we are doing there. But to answer your question, yes, they are on track, and I think this is very important, quite frankly, to Halifax, that this continues, that this shipbuilding. They've been in the business of building ships in Halifax and Nova Scotia for a long, long time. And this builds on that wonderful tradition that they have. But one of the things that I think would impress you is the number of spin-offs that there are to other businesses, other companies that benefit from this. And so we're going to continue. The Arctic Offshore Patrol ships are also part of the forward planning. And so I was quite impressed, and I guess it's, I believe this is all money very well worth spending.
And time, Mr. Williamson. Monsieur Brahmi, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So if we were to summarize the activities of the Canadian Forces today, there are two operations, one called Reassurance, which is a show of force in Ukraine, and one called Impact, which is a war operation in which there are bombings, airstrikes against various positions in Iraq. I would like the Minister to explain to us what the costs, which we call incremental costs, are for the forces that are deployed not within the country but outside. And if I understood correctly, these additional costs are not included in Sub Bs. And will these be included, these additional costs be included in Sub C? Sub B will only go until end of December, and Sub C is the costs that will be required to go to the end of the fiscal year until March 31st.
As the costs become apparent, we will report them in the usual manner. Operation Reassurance isn't directly to Ukraine. I wanted to just make sure that we make sure that that's well understood. I indicated that we are part of in the air. We are part of the Baltic Air Policing mission that is ongoing at the moment. We have troops in Poland. We have the HMCS Toronto in the Mediterranean on NATO deployment, and you can be assured all of these costs. We have, with these supplementary estimates, we are now at well over $19 billion for the Canadian Armed Forces, and so as these costs become apparent, and I hope they're going to get your support, because we have to have these funds so that our armed forces can conduct those important missions that you just described.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the Minister the question. The Minister stated that estimates cannot be made regarding how much airstrikes in Iraq are costing. However, we were able to do the same kind of mission in Libya. Now, how come we cannot extrapolate the costs, the expenses for Libya to the mission in Iraq to have an idea of how much the operation in Iraq will cost, since the exact same fighter planes are used? When I go into my writing and Canadians ask me why the U.S. Army can provide cost estimates, for example, $7 million per day, how come they can, and how come the Canadian Armed Forces cannot do so? Is it the financial services of the Armed Forces that are not as efficient as those in the U.S.?
With respect to the operation in Mali that took place, all the costs were tabled, and a complete description of everything that money was spent on was tabled because the mission, of course, was completed. But I thank you for your interest in what has taken place in Iraq. And as you know, our airstrike mission began about 7 weeks ago now, and we're going to be there. We have authorization for a 6-month mission, so I would reassure those people that yes, the mission is it's at the beginning stage. The first quarter of the deployment is authorized by the government and supported by Parliament, and you can tell them that, and you can say with pride that we are putting over $19 billion with these estimates are going into those Canadian Armed Forces to make sure that they have that capability, and so you can be assured that the government will continue to make sure that they have the funds that they need.
Je peux leur expliquer que le gouvernement.
But what I'd like to understand is that the government is asking for nearly $1 billion more to complete the fiscal year. I cannot explain to Canadians in my writing why the Canadian forces are unable to provide an estimate of costs for a mission in Iraq, since we are at war in Iraq, while the U.S. can do so. I cannot provide the people in my writing with an explanation as to why we don't have the financial tools to provide an estimate of the cost that the U.S. can provide.
Those constituents that are stopping you and asking you about this, that all the costs, just as we have in the past, will be made available to the public, and that they will know exactly how much these costs. And I think you should point out to them that many of them are fixed costs, that we own the CF-18s. We don't have to borrow equipment as we have sometimes in the past, that we now have the capability of moving equipment, men and women, out of these sites. And so you can tell them that is part of what we expend on our military.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Bizan, 5 minutes, please. Mr. Opitz.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today, and my old boss, General Thibault, as well. Thank you, sir. First of all, from reservists, thank you very much, Minister, for following through on your commitment to reservists and in your announcement today and being able to top up employers to help them deploy. As we know, approximately most missions are give or take about 25% reservists on most missions, which is very important to Canadian Armed Forces and our ability to carry out our missions abroad. Reservists step forward and they make sure that they contribute to that, and they do a professional, outstanding job. And you're also, by doing so, helping great organizations like Canada Company, our captains of industry, who have originally started a lot of this as interested individuals and have carried that on, and tremendous groups like Treble Victor and True Patriot Love, who just yesterday donated $5 million to the care of many of our veterans. So thank you on their behalf for that, because as a former reservist, as you pointed out, it's very gratifying to know that program's in place, because trying to get, as a former commander of a unit, it's very difficult to sometimes raise the strength to send out on deployments, and this just makes it easier for reservists to be able to deploy, do that job, and assure that employer that they're going to get back, and they're going to get that employer back. And just shifting quickly to op assurance, I have spoken to some troops who have done this. There's some intangibles that through this operation that have come through, and besides the very important assurance to our Baltic neighbors, in particular Poland right now, where they're positioned, this is something that turns out to be tremendous training for our troops in terms of wings exchange, some of the cross-cultural training that they do with the Poles, with the Lithuanians and other forces, the Brits and the Americans that are stationed there as well. This is something that develops our troops professionally abroad, and that's an impact that we're having there right now. And having talked to a Polish 3-star last night, who, by the way, learned his English here in Canada, we are reaping the benefits of those relationships, because Canada helped many of those Baltic states through the Canadian Forces College, through language training, and through other professional development training, which helps our forces today interact and interoperate with those Baltic states. So I'm very pleased that that's happening, because our troops are actually having a very rewarding experience in participating in those operations. Now, sir, just wanted to talk. We didn't talk about today's labs and the upgrading of the labs within the estimates. Can you describe to us what the value is in upgrading those labs to our troops? And
well, you've covered a number of areas, Colonel, and maybe I should check with your former boss as to how you did on that. I know.
I'm going to get
I know my interaction with you as
he's already written.
Colonel of the Lincoln and Welland Regiment was very positive, and we're very grateful for you and indeed everyone who participates in our reserves. And I think you summed it up very well, that these are dedicated, very patriotic Canadians who are prepared to help out their country. And what we've announced today and what we have done in the past is a perfect fit, in my opinion, to assist them, because we are indeed very, very grateful for their contributions. You pointed out as well that part of the estimate, the supplementary B estimates, will ensure that the LAV 3 upgrade vehicles will remain state-of-the-art. And so we're installing more armor. We're capitalizing on existing and evolving technology to improve the vehicle's mobility systems and the weapon systems. In my opinion, and the opinion of the armed forces, that this will give our men and women in uniform a safer and superior combat vehicle. And so I believe, as I testify before you, that these are worthwhile investments, the kind of investments that we should make. We should never go back to the way some things were sometimes in the past, where we did not maintain that capability, that we did not invest in the equipment or the up-to-date technology. We owe more than that to our men and women in uniform, and we owe it to this country to be able to respond when we are called upon, because we don't know when that's going to take place. We discussed a lot about the two, about Operation Impact and Reassurance, but Canada doesn't stand on the sidelines. That has not been the Canadian tradition. It's not a Canadian value, so we have to continue to invest in it. And this is why I'm so pleased and proud to be here once again with the supplementary estimates to make sure we maintain that capability for the members of our armed forces.
Thank you,
Minister, for your service in the reserves, though.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. And we have just a couple of minutes left before the Minister is scheduled to leave us. Mr. Chisholm, I would say 2 minutes, 30 seconds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Minister, I got to tell you, this is the normal process. This is, you know, government comes before a committee like this, it comes before Parliament, and it gets authority before it goes out and spends money. You know, you're talking, what, 6 months? Libya was $150 million. I mean, you're talking about, you know, $150+ million. Why is it that you're expecting us to give you a blank check to go out and do, you know, undoubtedly good things? Some people would suggest, but why is it that you think that it's not your responsibility to be accountable here? I know that the officials, senior officials in your department can figure out what an estimate is and to be able to provide it to members of Parliament. And I think it's outrageous. I think it's offensive that you would suggest to us that we don't care about, the Canadians don't care about how their money is being spent.
Order, Mr. Chisholm. This committee will be voting on these votes at the end of today's proceedings. A question, please, to the Minister.
That's my question. How can you show the kind of a contempt you're showing to this committee not to bring
that's unacceptable language.
Forward?
That's completely unparliamentary language. The Minister can choose to answer or not.
I appreciate you don't support any of the money that we are putting towards our armed forces, whether they be in the estimates or the main estimate. You're against it all, and that's fair enough. But I think it was important for me to come here before estimates B, that when we need these funds here, to make sure we have that capability. So you can be assured that if you change your mind and you start supporting military expenditures, you can be assured that the hundreds of millions of dollars that are here will go towards the Joint Personnel Support Unit. They will go towards the operational effectiveness of our equipment, and this is in addition to the main estimates that you did not support. But again, it was extremely important that we have that to maintain our armed forces. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. This committee, I say on behalf of the committee, appreciates your availability, your appearance before us today. We will suspend very briefly as the Minister departs, and we'll resume. Thank you, colleagues. Resuming proceedings, our witnesses for the next 40 minutes, because we'll need to vote on the votes, and then before we go into private committee business, are as introduced earlier. We have with us Deputy Minister Richard Fadden, Lieutenant General Guy Thibault, Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, Rear Admiral Patrick Finn, Chief of Staff, Materiel Group, Kevin Lindsay, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, and Jamie Pitfield, Assistant Deputy Minister, Infrastructure and Environment, as well as from the Communications Security Establishment, John Forster, the Deputy Head and Chief. Because of time constraints, we will make these 5-minute rounds, beginning with Mr. Bizan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I want to go on a point of order, so don't start the clock yet. Mr. Chisholm, in the last exchange with the Minister, in violation of Standing Order 18, which clearly says that no member shall speak disrespectfully of the Sovereign, nor any of the Royal Family, nor of the Governor-General, or the person administrating the Government of Canada, or use offensive words against either host or against any member thereof. And no member may reflect upon any vote. But anyway, his language to the Minister was offensive, and I believe that he owes an apology to the Minister, and I suggest that he do that in his next opportunity in the House of Commons to apologize to the Minister for even suggesting any of that language. You know, we're supposed to be conducting ourselves at a higher standard, especially at committee, and so I'm extremely disappointed.
On that point of what he said he was raising a point of order.
Responding to the point of order, Mr. Chisholm.
Yeah, I'm speaking to the point of order, Mr. Chairman. I don't accept what the member has suggested. I, as a member of this committee, frankly, felt insulted by the fact that the minister wasn't providing us with any. This operation is a big deal. I take it very seriously. My constituents take this matter very seriously, as do people within our caucus, and we're looking for some accountability. And I don't buy the fact that the department hasn't given the cabinet estimates, Mr. Chairman, and I'm just asking real basic questions about accountability. It's part of our parliamentary process, and I felt insulted that the minister would just basically give me and my questions and our questions the back of his hand. I don't think it's well, Mr. Chisholm, I don't think it's becoming of this government.
Mr. Chisholm, as I ruled during proceedings, you did use unparliamentary language. You may be frustrated, but as Mr. Bazan has pointed out, the conduct of this committee is to ask questions and to listen to answers. If you wish to proceed further with the rhetoric that is accepted in the House, then that's fine. But I think we do try to maintain a level. Shouting at a witness is unacceptable before any committee that I chair. But I think now, in the interest of time, I would hope that you would take under consideration Mr. Bazan's suggestion. An apology may be in order. I believe it is in order to the minister, even though you can respectfully disagree with the answers that you've heard. But let's get on with things now. Mr. Bazan, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses, all the members from NDDN Canadian Armed Forces for coming in and spending time with us today. I'm really excited to see that there is $900 million plus in the SUP-Bs to help with everything from readiness to our Canada First defense strategy and overhaul of equipment. One of the lines in here under Vote 1 provides for $190 million in extra funding for the Canadian Forces Services Income Security Insurance Plan, long-term disability components. And I was wondering if you could speak to that as to why we need it and how it's going to be utilized by members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
I'd be pleased to do that, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, you'll be aware that the CF Service Income Security Plan, it's a group insurance plan that supports the income of Canadian Armed Forces members who are disabled or released from the military for medical reasons. And there are similar plans in the RCMP and the public service. Essentially, $140 million of this amount will go towards strengthening the CSIP reserve. Like all funds of this nature, it's necessary to maintain it at a reasonable level as you go along. And of the $190 million mentioned here, $50 million will go towards the implementation of the settlement that we agreed to in the Manouche class action settlement that was ordered by the federal court.
Thank you. Now, of the $652 million, that's for sustainment and operational readiness. We talked about some of the overhauls and long-term investments that we're making. Can you go into a little more detail on particularly the LAV program, the upgrades that we're doing there, and how that is playing out in support of our Army?
I didn't hear you on the upgrade of what?
LAVs, light armored vehicles.
Okay.
The upgrades, the LAV ups.
In respect of the LAVs, it's difficult to add a great deal to what the minister is saying. Basically, we've come to the view that the vehicles that we have now can be improved by simply adding more armor and by upgrading the technology which provides for the mobility of the system, but also for its weapon system. The basic reason for doing this is to improve the capacity of those members who are operating it to function, and also at the same time to protect them.
Okay, thank you. In the capital expenditures, there's a reduction of $6.2 million. That's because, as the Minister alluded to, the sale of property at Downsview and Stanley Park. The question I have is that how is that being reinvested back into the military?
We have a general practice, Mr. Chairman, that when we acquire funds, and if you'll forgive me for using the word unexpected, I don't quite mean unexpected, but off the general process, that it is put in a general fund that is administered centrally by the senior leadership of the forces and of the department. So what we do is we will take this along with any other funds that we acquire offline, and over the course of the months ahead, either ourselves, if it's beneath a certain threshold, or if it's very important, we will ask the minister to make investments in shorter-term activities, exercises, the purchase of spare parts that might be necessary on the very short term. So we put it in a pot and we try to prioritize access to that pot for those issues that are the most important for the fiscal year at issue.
Thank you. And my final question, Mr. Fadden, is with the increase through Supplementary Estimates B, brings our total proposed authorities to date to almost $20 billion for the operation of the Canadian Armed Forces and national defense. Would you be able to speak to the fact, as you know, we're hearing from Ms. Murray, we're hearing from Mr. Chisholm, they want to know what the costs are for Operation Impact, Operation NATO Reassurance. Is there enough funding here to conduct our operations, not only abroad but here at home?
Well, let me start by saying that I think the Chief Operating Officer of any institution, including, I bet you, the Chair, would, if he were given the opportunity to acquire more money, would be delighted, be it for travel, for research, or whatever. Could we use more? We absolutely could. But with the adjustments that we've made over the course of the last several months, several years, we've reprioritized, we've stopped doing some things, and we've reallocated essential monies to readiness and to exercises and to operations abroad. So the short answer is, yes, I think we do, to be able to discharge the essential responsibilities that the Minister has under CFDS. But I wouldn't be being the Chief Operating Officer if I didn't say I'd certainly like a lot more, but we do have enough to discharge our essential duties.
Thank you, Mr. Fadden. Mr. Bevington, 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. I was interested in the Minister's comments about the importance of matching up the resources with the job at hand for the armed forces, and I think that's obviously something that has to be taken into account. But recently we've seen reports that the resources available for the frigate fleet have been indicate that we're likely only to have 4 coming out of that. Is the plan to build these ships been changed? Have you seen can we say that we only require 4 now rather than 8? Is this part of the planning, or is there really a need for 8 ships for the Canadian Navy?
Mr. Chairman, forgive me for correcting you, but I don't think you're referring to the frigates. The frigates are the modernization program. You're probably referring to the
Arctic patrol ships.
The Arctic patrol ships. I think when the government made the initial announcement, they said they would try and obtain up to a certain amount in order to provide for increased costs and whatnot. Our current planning in working with our industry counterparts is to get as many of these vessels as we possibly can. Much like the answer to my previous question, if you ask the commander of the Navy, can he use an extra vessel, the answer is always yes. But I go back to the initial announcement of the government, which said that we would get as many as we could for the monies that were available.
You really don't have a particular plan that says you needed 8 or 6 or 4. There's no number attached to it. So how is that part of capital planning if we don't have a raison d'etre for these boats that we're putting in the water? So many on one coast, so many in the other. Perhaps some. You know, there should be some kind of plan attached to the capital acquisition, wouldn't you think?
Well, I entirely disagree with you, Mr. Chairman, when you suggest there's no plan. If there's one thing the Department of Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces have, it's plans.
Fine, there's a plan. Okay, I'll leave it at that. I wanted to move over to Mr. Forster for a second. You're building a new building. It's a very expensive building, but it's my understanding that you have contingents from other countries that occupy space in your existing facilities. The U.S., NSA has a contingent there. I don't know if that applies to the other under the listening program. Do you lease this space to other countries within your own facilities?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The short answer is no. We do have exchanges of personnel amongst the Five Eyes, in particular Australia, US, and the UK. So they have some personnel that work with us, liaison officers and so on, and vice versa. And no, we don't charge each other rent.
So these are not separate operations? These people are working within your jurisdiction within the building?
There are liaison officers assigned to each other's countries to interact and deal with our partners on operational issues. And then we would have people posted there, and they have some people posted with us.
So there's a structure for this liaison that is very well laid out in terms of the information sharing that may take place?
Yes, there's provisions around all that and they're annually reviewed as well. Our commissioner actually just recently in his report this summer tabled a report on information sharing.
Thank you.
Well, take it then.
Mr. McFadden, sorry, Mr. Fadden, you just said in answer to my colleagues, I thought, I may have misheard, that in regards to Operation Impact, that you believe that you can do it within the current budget of the Department of National Defense?
Mr. Chairman, I understand there's a long-standing tradition of the House and of its committees that officials aren't asked to contradict their ministers.
You're quite right, Mr. Fadden, or to speak on policy.
I was seeking clarification. I didn't mean to put you in a difficult position, but he had given an answer, Mr. Chairman, that I hadn't heard from the minister. That's why I was looking for clarification.
Well, I believe the witness would like his answer to stand and to offer no further comment.
Okay.
And that is time. Mr. Opitz, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you want, you know what? I'm going to pass my time to Mr.
Chizu.
I don't want the engineers getting angry.
5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a question. The minister alluded for funding related to assessment, management, and remediation of federal contaminated sites. Can you elaborate on that area of? Because I know it is very important to decontaminate the contaminated sites which coming out from the First World War, basically.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I could ask Mr. Pitfield to answer. He's the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for this area.
Yes, Mr. Pitfield.
Thank you. National Defense has a significant program or share of the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. And this year we will spend roughly $60 million to continue remediating the sites across Canada.
Can you specify which sites? Niagara Falls, Petawawa, or?
What we do is based on risk assessments, and so we have a significant work underway at not at Goose Bay, but in Labrador. It's at Goose Bay in Labrador. We also are undertaking work at Ipperwash. We have a number of sites. There's quite a few, and I can, if you're specific to one, I can tell you what we have.
Thank you very much. Another question that I have is the DND is not requesting any additional funding for the Vote 5. So that means that the infrastructures are, the building of the infrastructures are okay in every Canadian basis, and you are transferring more than 6.2 million from capital expenditures to help fund programs and initiatives in other federal departments and agencies. And in my experience in the Canadian Corps of Engineers, I know that we always need to replenish the infrastructure on our basis. So is there any justification on that, or how you are explaining the transfer. It's not a big amount of money, but...
Sorry, what's the question?
Let me start, Mr. Chairman. You're quite right that the Canadian Armed Forces is one of the largest holders of infrastructure in the country. And quite honestly, we could probably allocate more money on an ongoing basis to this function. There are limited capabilities, and there's a limited amount of money available overall. So what we do, as Mr. Pitfield suggested, is that we have a list of priorities that we try and assign funds to in any given year. I would note, if I may, that to some degree the government has recognized that we do need more money on infrastructure through the announcement of the Prime Minister yesterday, when he indicated that I think some $452 million would be available to us to enable to both repair and enhance Canadian Armed Forces facilities. The difficulty we have, as I'm sure you are aware, is that in any one given year, sometimes you can use more, sometimes you can use less. And some of the transfers out are to other departments to enable them to do things for us and vice versa.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You have a moment?
Yes. When you are speaking about the $15 million of the reinvestment of revenues from the sale or transfer of real property, can you explain a little bit, can you elaborate in this vote one issue?
Could Mr. Pitfield answer, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Pitfield.
So at National Defense, we have a policy where when monies come back to the department from the disposal or sale of real property, they're reinvested in real property. So in this case, the $15 million, it will go to cover leases in the Ottawa area. Some will go to cover remediation of contaminated lands. I have a list in front of me here that I can't find right now, but but basically, at the end of the day, our intention here is that we take monies and we repurpose it to continue reinvesting.
Thank you very much.
Time. Thank you. Ms. Murray, please. 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I'm just going to start by saying that today is Navy Appreciation Day, and so I'm going to express my appreciation for the good work of the Royal Canadian Navy, and especially for the men and women in uniform who do that service for Canadians. So last week, Vice Admiral Norman acknowledged the delays in replacing ships, and the retirement of 4 ships was going to be creating some real challenges for having a fully functioning Navy in terms of being able to resupply our ships and in terms of aerial defense with the destroyers, with there being 5 to 7, 8, 9 years gap in having essential ships in the Navy. So are there any short-term solutions to that problem expressed in these supplementary estimates?
Fundamentally, I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. What we're trying to do, and as I think Admiral Norman said, is we're using the assets that we have now and we're prioritizing their tasking. The frigates are coming offline now, as the Minister intimated earlier.
Okay,
we now have 3 submarines operating.
Thank you. I have a few more questions, so I'm really looking for just a very focused answer to my questions. Secondly, there was a document leaked that had been prepared by the ADM for material that talked about the need for the DND's procurement organization needing $3 billion to make its promised purchases, but only $2.3 billion were available for those purchases. So clearly there's a gap. And is that shortfall addressed in these figures of the supplementary estimates?
Admiral Finn?
Thank you for the question. Yes, some of the money in here actually comes to the maintenance that we're talking about there. If I could just very quickly, the $3 billion is an overall estimate of what we would need, not necessarily what we can execute with industry. So the 2.3 was the initial, and there's some top up in here. Okay,
thank you. And also those leaked reports talked about big morale problems, attrition, burnout, and the upcoming exodus of many, many skilled employees in the procurement branch, creating a significant risk to program execution. Has there been anything, if that, so that came from the department, is that addressed in the supplementary estimates?
There is nothing specific in the supplementary estimates. That is our human resource plan where we define potential future states and risks, and it also contains a number of things that we are doing to mitigate against those risks.
Thank you very much. I want to talk a little bit about spending lapses. So, and my question will be, how much of the proposed authorities to date are planned to be lapsed? And the context for that is that there's been major funding lapsed over the past number of years. In fact, to the tune of about $14 billion has been either lapsed or our budget cuts in the last 3 years of $4.6 billion. So we know that the monies authorized and planned and announced are often clawed back and not available to the Canadian Armed Forces for expenditure. So is it already built into the plan a lapsing of the funding that's being authorized here? And if so, how much?
Could I ask Mr. Lindsay to answer, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like all government departments and agencies, DND has the authority to carry forward every year some certain amount of money. In the case of DND, that is 2.5% of our operating budget and our capital budget. It is our assumption each year that because of events beyond our control, we will carry forward some proportion of that 2.5%.
Okay, so thank you. I just want to point out that spending lapses have represented 20% of DND's capital budget since 2009, compared to an average of 2% between 1973 and 2006. So this has been a major source of savings for this government to be able to make other election promises. So are we,
very briefly,
are we expecting to see more lapses in the order of 20%, or are you planning for a lower level of lapsing?
A brief answer, please.
We don't plan on capital lapses. When suppliers to DND fail to deliver what they have contracted to do, we don't pay them, and that is beyond our control. And so the money that we do not pay the contractor is carried forward to the future year to pay for the item when it is delivered.
So
thank you,
I'm
Mr.
surprised
Lindsay.
to hear that explanation.
Time, Ms. Murray. Mr. Opitz, please, 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair. I noted that DND is asking for the authority to transfer more than $3.3 million to other federal government departments and some agencies. And some of that includes $962,000, for example, to Shared Services Canada for information technology infrastructure, for the Military Personnel Management Capability Transformation Project. Can you comment on that? Tell me what your end state is with that project?
Well, just in guise of a little bit of background, Mr. Chairman, you'll be aware that it has been decided some time ago that the non-secure, beneath top-secret level communications capacity of the Government of Canada will be centralized in Shared Services Canada. And we have an ongoing program beyond what was initially transferred to Shared Services Canada to make sure that they have the resources to execute on our behalf various programs. All this is doing is something along those lines.
Great. I'll just refer to CSC now, and that's requesting approximately $8.2 million in funding for its long-term accommodation project, and it's over $1.6 million for the implementation of a risk mitigation framework for telecommunications networks. Could you explain in some detail how these additional funds are going to be spent and applied?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first item is $8.2 million. It is actually a reprofiling from last year. It is going towards equipment in the new building that we are in the process of occupying related to audiovisual and IT equipment, that it wasn't ready to be completed last year and was rolled forward to this year as part of our building. So that money was reprofiled from last year to this year. The $1.6 million in new funding, CSC's primary mandate in cyber defense has been to protect the networks of the Government of Canada, and that's been our focus the last couple of years. And I think as we've all seen over the past recent months, the level of cyber attacks that we're facing continue to increase. This amount of money here will actually allow us to put some of our expertise to work with critical infrastructure providers and the private sector, non-government folks, to begin to assist them in strengthening their networks and telecommunication networks against cyber attacks such as we've seen over the past few months.
Great, thank you. Still time? Oh, 2 minutes, great. I'd like to talk a little bit about how D&D, Environment Canada, Fisheries and Oceans, and Parks Canada are working together in the field of search and rescue right now. So, excuse me. So specifically, what specific search and rescue prevention and coordination initiatives would be covered by, I talked about that $3.3 million earlier being transferred, to the funds transferred to Environment Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the Parks Canada Agency. Could anybody comment on that? Mr. Lindsay, perhaps?
So, Mr. Chair, as members will be aware, search and rescue is a partnership among a number of departments and agencies in Canada. This year, D&D is transferring to Parks Canada funding in the amount of about $336,000 to support an initiative called Coast Smart, which helps Parks Canada help its users manage risk by making them aware of them. With respect to Fisheries and Oceans, Fisheries is piloting thermal imaging and night imaging technology on its 47-foot motorboats. And so we are assisting them in that pilot project. And lastly, with respect to Environment Canada, we're providing funding that will allow Environment Canada to help train its volunteers in search and rescue.
Okay. It's Mr. Chisholm, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, the D&D is requesting $652.2 million in funding to support the sustainment of investments made under the Canada First Defence Strategy. And in the D&D's report of plans and priorities 2014-15, it's indicated that D&D and the CAF will renew the Canada First Defence Strategy, and that this revised strategy will build on the successes of the original Canada First Defence Strategy. I guess a couple of questions. When can we expect the renewed CFDS to be publicly released? Can you explain how the government's Deficit Reduction Action Plan has affected the implementation of the strategy? And what will the top priorities of the renewed strategy be, and how different will the new strategy be from the original one that was adopted in 2008?
Mr. Chairman, as the government did announce in the recent speech from the throne, consideration has been given to developing a revised Canada First Defence Strategy. The department has pulled together some recommendations to the government. And again, Mr. Chairman, a long-standing tradition, it is a cabinet confidence, and I'm unable to comment.
So you can't tell us if we can expect? No, okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, let me let me move on to another one. D&D's Departmental Performance Report, tabled on the same day as the Supplementary Estimate B, November of this year, noted that a little more than half, 54.5% of the Canada First Defence Strategy projects are on time. When you look at the joint and common support projects, none of them are on schedule despite a target of 85%. Let me give you an example. The percent of joint and common support projects on schedule, 0. Percent of aerospace projects on schedule, 55. Percent of land projects on schedule, 43.5. Percent of maritime projects on schedule, 57%. Mr. Fadden, I wonder if you can explain what, why we haven't been able to achieve the projected 85%, and to what extent the $652 million DND is requesting will help the government actually meet its own target with regard to the acquisition of equipment and material in accordance with the defense strategy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in order to understand why we haven't met our target, it's important to understand that DND is one of a significant number of other players that operate on the procurement side. We work with Public Works, Industry Canada has a role, the Treasury Board often has a role, and then there's a vast array of private corporations with which we deal, some of whom are very efficient and always on time, some of which are not. So you put all this together and we end up with some delays that we would probably prefer not to have. You'll be aware that the government recently enacted a defense procurement strategy. One of the objectives of this strategy is to accelerate our ability to deliver on a variety of these programs, and also commits us to review some of the processes that we have internally and that Public Works have internally. So we're hopeful with a little bit of the passage of time we will be able to report next year or subsequent years higher percentage than we have been able to this year.
Let me just say I hope so, because I mean, listen, I'm from Dartmouth, Halifax area, and I want this I want this program to work because people are getting increasingly discouraged. But I guess I'm puzzled because you know your department's been in this business for some time, and why would you set a projected completion rate at 85% if there were so many so many outside items outside of your control, because what happens is it's making you look bad, and and therefore people's confidence in your ability to actually produce on time, on schedule, on budget is compromised, frankly.
I think the partial answer, Mr. Chairman, is that it is a standard management technique to set objectives that you then prod your people to try and meet. And certainly my colleagues and I at this table use these objectives in order to poke and prod away at our colleagues in the department and in other departments in order to encourage them to improve. If we had set a target that's too low, I think it would be much harder to be able to incite people to meet an objective as the one as we've set. We could have set a different one. There's nothing magical about it, but the objective really is to set it high enough and make people stretch to try and reach it over a number of years.
Thank you, Mr. Fadden. Time. And finally, Mr. Norlock, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here, and through you to them, Mr. Chair. And in particular, I believe my questions will go to General Thibault, but someone else who may feel they're better qualified can ask. I'm a great fan of helicopters, and I know that in the Afghanistan, we, as a result of our Afghanistan experience, we learned that by transitioning people from one place to another, utilizing a helicopter saved us a lot of injuries, as opposed to going over land in the IEDs. And so I'd like to talk about helicopters for a minute. The first one is, of course, we purchased some EH-101s, and I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of 50 were ordered back in the 80s and canceled at a cost of $500 million. So not only was there not spent, the government spent $500 million, the government of the day, a Liberal government of the day, spent $500 million to cancel a contract for which we got zero. And now we're replacing, we've just purchased some 101s, and I just wonder what that cost. And I wonder, getting back to the Chinooks, why, what locations, why were the Chinooks chosen? I think I gave you a hint there. And what location, where are they being located at? And how will the upgrades to the aircraft make it suitable for completion of this sort of mission?
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, and perhaps my colleague Admiral Finn might add some additional context for this. So certainly our helicopter, our rotary wing assets that we have are supporting our activities not only for the land force but obviously in the maritime domain, and they are essential in fact to our operational ends of the Canadian Armed Forces. They give us unique capabilities, whether they be at home or, as we've seen in places like, say, the Philippines, where all of these kind of operations require mobility for the purposes of resupply, for the purposes of really humanitarian relief and disaster response, and obviously in a domestic context essential to really complement our overall search and rescue response that we have both in our domestic land territory as well as in the maritime domain. The Chinooks, of course, are primarily heavy lifters, and they're not only heavy lifting for Army assets, and we could see them being employed in Canada's north. They could be used, obviously, for all of our domestic response, and in international operations, we would certainly intend on employing them as well in that context. They've all been consolidated in one garrison in Petawawa, just kind of to the north of here. That was done for economical purposes. When we first thought of acquiring these assets, we thought that maybe we'd have them in two main bases, but we kind of really opted on one main base for them based on the ability to really sustain that fleet and to provide them for all of the operational requirements of the Canadian Armed Forces. I think I'd like to turn to my colleague to talk a little bit more about the Maritime Helicopter Patrol as well as what we've done with the 101s to give you a little bit of a sense for what we're doing with those assets and how we're bringing on the MHP.
Thank you very much for the question. Of course, we're using the 101, the Cormorants, in the rotary wing search and rescue role across Canada. It is supplemented by the Bell helicopters, the Griffin helicopters for search and rescue as well. We have now done a fair amount of work and have updated contracts with Sikorsky for the Cyclone maritime helicopter, and we'll start seeing delivery of that as far as a blocking strategy as we've done with other aircraft now, with the first Block 1 aircraft being delivered and starting to see initial operations next summer.
For the EH-101s, what's going to be our total purchase price for those aircraft?
So
you don't have to be exact. You can just.
So I don't. So the Augusta Westland aircraft, which you call the EH-101, of course, were acquired some time ago. I don't have the acquisition numbers with us. In fact, we're approaching midlife on those airframes. They have been the search and rescue aircraft for some time. The ones we're in acquisition right now are the maritime helicopters from Sikorsky, which is a different capability than how we're using the.
If I'm not mistaken, it's a version of the 101, is it? Or
no,
is it
the
totally
Sikorsky.
different?
I beg your pardon. The Sikorsky is a different. It's a variant of, I believe, a Black Hawk helicopter, and it's being marinized for being brought to sea. But most importantly, the level of systems integration, because as we upgrade the frigates and its capability from an anti-submarine warfare perspective, we have to have a capable helicopter that can actually operate in that same domain. So very sophisticated combat management system inside the helicopter.
Thank you, Admiral Finn, and time, Mr. Norlock. Thank you to all of our witnesses today. And now, colleagues, we've heard from the Minister, we've heard from officials, and it is time for us to make our opinion to be forwarded to the House. Shall vote 1B under the Communications Security Establishment be carried? On division, on recorded division, in favor?
On division.
Oh, on division.
Yep.
Shall vote 1B under the Military Police Complaints Commission carry?
On division.
On division. Shall vote 1B under National Defence carry?
On division.
On division. And finally, shall vote 10B under National Defence carry?
On division.
On division. Shall the Chair report vote 1B under Communications Security Establishment, vote 1B under the Military Police Complaints Commission, and votes 1B and 10B under National Defence to the House?
On division.
On division. Thank you, colleagues. We will now suspend as the room is cleared before we deal with committee business.